So, that's just, obviously it's just a stream of consciousness. I brought a couple percussion instruments just because I thought I might want them. Nothing is planned out. I did repeat some ideas. You can probably hear like a little more melodic thing between the toms and stuff to kind of just have some kind of structure to go back on. Because sometimes if you play completely free and there's no form, it can be interesting, but sometimes it's just like talking, just kind of blabbering and not having a subject to go back to. But the idea too is, dynamics, hopefully rhythmically it's sounding cool, hopefully got some nice textures. A lot of times, when you play, the instrument also plays you. So especially if you're going for something that you haven't practiced a lot. For instance, like in the new drum magazine, because not Modern Drummer, but Drum Magazine, there's a really cool 10-day exercise for faster hands by this guy named Mike Johnson. He's a teacher out on the West Coast, and he also does, he's kind of famous for like the gospel chops thing. And that's all about like, playing the same thing for 2 minutes, then going to a little faster, 10% faster, 10 minutes, all about muscle memory. When you play like this, it's about muscle memory from the past, but it's also, I'm trying to get myself in trouble. I want to entertain myself. I want to see where it goes, And sometimes, as they say, maybe it's more fun to play than listen to with avant-garde music. But hopefully, the whole idea of doing something like this, in fact, the things I played before I started, there's a dance troupe called Dance Work Chicago. That's a really amazing, probably the best dance company in Chicago, all professionals. And they're doing a concert where they're actually choreographed all the stuff to those pieces. And it's fascinating to see what my music, me playing, and the way people interpret even in dance moves. Because again, a lot of stuff that we do here is also motion. When we play, some people play very tight, they play very, compact. Some people just do some big motion. I mean, that's sort of where I come from, even though they all have specific sort of sound differences and specific genres of music that might sound better with one than the other. Any questions right now on any of this? Because I'm here for you guys too, so come on. Yes?
What is your practice schedule? How do you practice?
Nowadays? Well, I practice every morning. It's funny, every morning before I go to bed, I have one of these things called the beatnik. Have you heard of the beatnik? It's this thing, it looks like a little blue practice pad with rain on it, and it measures your accuracy up to a 512. So you have the drumometer, which is great. That practice how fast you can go. So how many beats, how many strokes can you get in 1 second, and then say if you can do 18 in 1 second, then you do 36 for 2 seconds. So you start seeing your endurance. The beatnik is the opposite in the way it measures your accuracy. So when you have a metronome going like this, just because you're on it doesn't mean you're really necessarily really. So every morning, what I do, I get up and I practice. I warm up. I was going to show some stuff in the master class. So I can show you a little bit about this. I warm up. I do the first thing like I like to use heavy sticks too when I warm up in the morning. But I'll do the thing where you kind of hold all the fingers and just go really like all wrist, just to kind of get my range of motion going. You really feel that here. Do that for about a minute or so, then start incorporating the fingers, so I'm doing this. Then a lot of these exercises, all this kind of stuff. Anybody not know about these things? Okay. To hold the sticks, because really, in a way, the stick is really the translator between you and the instrument. So a lot of times people think, well, the stick is just, something you hit with. And it's true, you have different, these are hickory, you have oak, you have different kinds of wood, different diameters, different lengths, different tips, and they all have a difference. But it's also the way you hold the stick that really matters. So the fulcrum, anybody not know where fulcrum is? Everyone knows. Okay, so you got your fulcrum here. It used to be in the old days, this was your main fulcrum, and this is where you hold the stick, right here. So just doing this is really good for that. Now people hold the stick back here. There's even the pinky hold back here. That gives you more like swing, but it's hard to do a roll that way. So I'll start doing this. Then I'll start getting all the fingers involved. Because what you want to do with your thumb, especially if anybody have a weak left hand compared to the right, Okay. So the stick kind of wobbles side to side and everything when you're doing it, when you're trying to do stuff. So the thumb is really, it should be an extension almost of your arm. So when you're doing stuff like this, you want that thumb to be stable and the fingers move against the thumb. So if your thumb is moving all over the place, it's like being on a teeter-totter, but the middle is also, you know, it's not going to really work. So, you know, I go in it, I do a lot of this. Then there's one where you really go and you just kind of throw it out like this. You know, there's, I mean, drummers like Mike Mangini, you know, he's playing with Dream Theater right now. I mean, so you kind of get and just basically do this. So you really want to be building this thumb muscle right here. That's where you're really going to feel it. So then your fulcrum's going to be a lot stronger. So then after that, after I do that, I practice, and then I'll do different. I'll put on the beat deck, and I'll usually do it as like, you know, whatever thing I set it in. And I make sure that there's three settings actually. There's low. No, there's four settings. There's low, medium, high, and exact. So low is between 512 notes. Medium is between 5. High is between 3, and exact is exactly on. So I make sure that at least in high I get like high 90s, you know, and you know so that way I'm set. And like when I sit down and do it, you know, sometimes you feel like, you know, you're tired or you get some coffee. So the whole idea is to zone in and really feel the extension of the stick on that pad so that you're in that zone. So I do that every morning. I also do a lot of foot exercises. One good foot exercise, there's Tim Waterston, who was like one of those guys that he had the fastest feet for a long time. There's a great exercise to get your feet happening where you play the heel down, and then the second one you roll up. So you're basically doing the this starts, so then this motion here, it's easier to start rocking. And so on your downstroke, you get a free stroke. But that do that in the morning with both feet. And also, you know, when you talk about expression, because, you know, like I said, this drum set I've never played before, so I have to kind of figure out how I'm going to try to get whatever ideas I'm thinking and feeling, how to translate that. So a lot of the strokes on the drum set, you know, there's the open stroke, you know, straight down. There's the side stroke, which is a lot different. That's all sounds the same. The difference there? So, it sounds like a hammer. So on that stroke, you can hear out of two strokes, I'm getting two sides. So this is like, you know, sort of old school in a way, because if you watch all the old great jazz drummers, and nowadays there's no excuse not to, because YouTube has everybody. If you see those guys play, and they all played until they died, you know, in the 70s, 80s, and so they had this. They're doing all these different strokes to get a melody out of it. Instead of, it's kind of okay, but it's kind of straight. So I'm able to kind of like, I'm playing the drums and the drums playing me. And then I'm also using, I love dead strokes. I mean, that's why, like on this talking drum, so you know, you have the, so that's a sound. So for me, a lot of the things I love to do, that's why I like putting the blankets on, that thing's dead, but so if you watch like somebody like Buddy Rich, and he's playing, I mean, a lot of times he'll go and hit the floor time, he'll just dead. So I mean, it also goes up in pitch. So that's another thing. So now if I'm thinking about to use me to translate my ideas, what are my ideas? Do I want to ask a question? You know, I can almost hear the drum talk, which is sort of what I'm trying to do. Other things is like, am I coming down with, you know, like a French grip, or am I going like more like American? Which is different. that's a higher pitch. You hear that? If I play only one, so can you guys hear all that? You know? And I mean, those are just kind of things that make us different than the person playing the same thing next to us. So when you're trying to be in a drum corps, for instance, and everybody does have to be the same, then you don't want to be doing this, really, because then, you know, the whole idea is to have everybody be in unison, look the same, sound the same, and that's the idea behind music. But if you're playing music that has a lot of expression, then you're going to want to have as many different strokes as possible, different angles. So all those things, you know, and after a while you kind of get used to the point where, you know, I feel something and I just know how to hit it, so I can express what I'm thinking at the time. And you know, it's a lot of it's muscle memory. Some of it is just kind of just letting yourself be. I mean, there's a really famous avant-garde guitar player, Derek Beale. He's dead. He was British, and he was one of the top studio players in England, you know, for years. You know, playing on pop hits and everything. And all of a sudden, one day he goes, God, I'm not playing music. I'm working music. So he just went and he became like this famous. I mean, he's on hundreds of records where it just sounds. He just uses a regular hollow body guitar and an amplifier. And it sounds like his fingers are getting caught. And I played with him. Actually, there's a 3 CD box set, Pat Metheny and me and another drummer, Greg Bandian. It's called Sign of War. And I mean, when you play with him, he doesn't develop any ideas. I mean, you know, there's no patterns to his music. And the whole idea is just to have this completely weird kind of expression at that moment when you're playing. It's like you're a kid in a sandbox or something, and you're just kind of having fun. And I mean, so, you know, music has different functions. Music, you know, can either function as like pure art, pure self-expression, and if you're lucky, you can do that, because that's really when it's fun. That's when people come and hear you play, because they just want to hear what you have to say. It's great. But then, you know, 90% of the music that we do play is usually functional. It's either playing for dances, or playing, you know, for your big band for a concert or whatever, where you have a chart. So in your careers, you know, you're going to have all those different things. You're going to be playing a rock gig one time, you know, you're playing a hip hop thing another time, and you'll be playing, you know, like a polka, who knows, you know, whatever you be playing. But the whole idea with that is to be able to have enough music and enough facility that you can fit in whatever is going on. And for me, I was always lucky because I did so many interesting things that when I went to play like a wedding, you know, and they say, play a polka, I had no problem, because now I know what a polka is, but I also didn't feel like, oh gosh, you know, I haven't expressed myself, so I've got to go, you know, do something crazy, like, because sometimes drummers, especially, you know, they practice all this stuff and they want to do a fill because they kind of play the fill, you know, and a lot of times, if you do enough different types of music, you realize that, like, you know, if you got the gig with AC/DC, Phil Rudd's a friend of mine. I mean, it's funny, his name is Phil because he doesn't play any fills. And so his like that, you know, and it just grooves, and he doesn't have to play anything because it makes that music what that music is about. So, you know, again, it's, you know, music is also like an extension of life. I mean, you know, as Americans, you know, we think, well, you know, we have freedom, which we do, but I mean, how much freedom? You can't just, you know, stop your car in the middle of the expressway and decide to have a picnic on the expressway. That's not really going to work. I mean, if there was true freedom, you could do that, but then that really wouldn't work for everybody, because it's also a society, and we're all in it together, which is what basically music is too. Okay? Comments? Anything? I'm going to start giving prizes away to people and ask questions. So, who's got a question? Who wants a pair of drumsticks? Yes? Excellent idea. Here's a pair of drumsticks. These are my signature sticks, by the way. There you go. Great question. Now, okay, sometimes when they say necessity is the mother of invention, okay, I was playing in this African percussion group. There's an ethnomusicologist from Northwestern University called Paul Berlin. And if you ever want to read a really amazing book on jazz, he's got a book, it's like 800 pages called Thinking in Jazz, where he actually talks to all these great musicians and asks them all these different things, so you really get a chance to see what it's like to be a musician and how they thought, and it's a wonderful book. So anyway, long story short with that, we had a band called Kudu for the Kudu horn. So it's like an animal horn kind of thing. And so one concert we were playing in New York, and it turned out it was at an art gallery. And so I set up my drums, and it's all windows. It's like the sound is like horrendous. I mean, if I touch the drums, it was like so loud. So I'm thinking, well, I'm on this gig. What am I going to do? So I went, and I said, does anybody have like a blanket or something? And somebody said, yeah. So I ended up taking the blanket. This is just a sheet, but I ended up really just doing this because the music was really very, sort of African sounding. So that sound, ended up giving me, that kind of, it almost sounds like you can turn the drum away. And even the cymbals. So all of a sudden they had this really nice dry sound, so I could play the way I wanted to play and not hold back, and yet it sounded really unique. So all of a sudden I went, I kind of like this. So then, after that, I started experimenting around, I mean, sometimes I'll put close pins on my cymbals. For me, it's just sound. All this is a sound. I mean, we're used to certain sounds. Okay, this is a hi-hat. Everybody knows what a hi-hat is. But the hi-hat didn't really even come out until the 1920s. I mean, so before that, there was no hi-hat. But now everyone knows what it is. So, and most people say, okay, well, I have different hi-hat cymbals and, with different thicknesses and different diameters, or whatever works for the music. Okay, that's the sound everyone knows. But it's just not like this. I mean, I don't know what that is. It sounds like a blanket on the drums. But at the same time, it's like, wow, I mean, and it makes me think different. It also makes you clamp your tape. Because, I mean, if you can play this thing, all of a sudden it sounds really cool. And actually, one time, a couple of years ago, at the Chicago Jazz Fest, they had me do a 1-hour seminar. And so I went out there, and I wanted to play something like this, but I didn't bring it. So I looked, there was a tarp. They had like a big rain tarp, and it was clear actually. So not only did I put it over this and start playing with this, then after a while I just went like this. So then people, so they could start seeing this too, it was a big tarp, and people just flipped out. Because it looked like I was underneath this thing, which I was, and they could see me, and the sound was still manipulated in a really cool way, but all of a sudden, the drummer became like a ghost or something. So, because I mean, when I think of drums and get back into motion, I'm trying to think, what was I just watching? There's some famous drummers like Joe Jones, Papa Joe Jones, if you don't know who he is. He was famous drummer Count Basie. Back in the 30s, he was the one that really started using the hi-hat, kind of smooth out the time. And when you watch him, he's just like a ballet dancer. It's so beautiful to watch. And like when I think of some of the really great athletes or entertainers that are so beautiful to watch, I think of Michael Jordan. When you watch him, it's just like, you have these extended motions, and it's like poetry. Or Michael Jackson, I mean, his reach everywhere, a lot of people just go like this, but these guys go all the way. And so the same thing on the drums. I mean, if you play like, I mean, that's okay, you can still do it, but it sort of doesn't really look like it. But if you can just dance on the drums, and just sort of, it's basically a dance. It's real, and each kind of group is a different kind of dance that you require. And just like there are different dances for different types of music. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I saw you first get it.
Have you always been so open-minded as far as music?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know why. I mean, I'm an only child. My parents really weren't into music, so, I don't know where I became, a musician. That's why I became a drummer. So, So, you know, I always loved, I mean, I guess when I first started out, some of the recordings I had, you know, and I'm 60, okay? So, you know, I was lucky enough to be around in the late 60s where that was like amazing period of music. I mean, there was so many, every rock band sounded different, every jazz group sounded different, every recording you buy. I mean, I used to go to, when I was living in Cary, there was a food chain, like a Jewel or Dominic's, was called National Foods. I guess they're still out on the East Coast or whatever. But back then, you know, so you go shopping for groceries, and they have bins of records. And, you know, half these records, you know, I didn't even know what these were. I go, oh, look at this. Oh, man, oh, Cream. And turn around and go, Ginger Baker, undoubtedly one of Europe's greatest members. Okay, I'm buying this, you know. Or, you know, Frank Zappa, Freak Out. Okay, I'm buying this, you know. Led Zeppelin. Oh, never heard of them. It looks, I like the way these guys look on the back. I mean, it was just kind of one of those things. So I would buy jazz records, rock records. I bought African records. I bought a lot of ethnic music. There's this one record. It was on this label called None Such, which is still around. And one of the funniest things is that it was music from Chile. Okay, I've been to Chile many times. They have great musicians down there. But back then, you know, Chile must have been Jupiter for me. And there were all these different folkloric cuts, supposedly. And two of them had this old woman and this old man. And on the liner notes, because that's the one thing that, you know, records used to have that unfortunately most MP3s don't, is that you had liner notes. So you could, like, you know, read about the music, you knew who was on it, who recorded it, you could put two and two together. So this whole thing is talking about this man. He's going to play a box with his wife, and he's searching around for this box. And it's very interesting. So when you hear this piece of music, she's like, and he's going, you know, and it sounds like complete chaos. And I'm going, wow, that's pretty cool, you know, because it's like that's music from another part of the world, and yet it sounds very foreign to me. So I want to, rather than turn myself off from it and say no, I'm not ready for it. You kind of embrace it, and the more you embrace things, then you learn about things, and you keep on growing and getting wider and wider. And the funniest thing now, if you think about what that box might have been in the '60s, probably something he was trying to play like a cajon. You know, he's looking for like this wood box. So now you can buy a cajon and do that. But you know, in general, back then it was just totally mysterious. And so that, but add to the fact that like almost all my friends were really pretty open-minded as was my band director, because I turned my band director on this stuff, and he was like, oh, that's fantastic. But you know, it would be not unusual. All of a sudden, you know, my friend comes over with this new record. Oh, there's a band called Santana, never heard of them. You know, there's a band called Black Stat. Oh, they sound interesting. You know, I mean, so we were constantly kind of replenishing our sound. And then, so for me, rather than try to sound like any of the drummers, because I never tried to sound like anybody else. You know, it was like I take different things from different people. But a lot of times, rather than try to do exactly what they did, I tried to more or less figure out what they were doing, how it affected the music. I tried to come up with my own way. That's basically what I did. And so, you know, sometimes being open-minded gets you in trouble because, you know, if you were in cliques that are like, oh, you know, bebop is the only jazz, or, you know, well, you know, or, you know, classic rock is the only real rock, then people are going to look at you, if you're open, you know, like, well, you know, you're too liberal. But I'll tell you, as far as being an artist and a musician, why not have as many, you know, it's like having a box of Crayolas. I mean, why have 5 colors in your box of Crayolas when you can have, you know, 62 or whatever in the box. And then you start mixing and matching. And it's also funny because, you know, not everybody has to be this way too. You know, people can be the way they want to be, because once you, in your career, once you set your parameters for what you like and stuff, then all of a sudden you start meeting people of like mind. Now that's great if you like if you like what you're doing, and then you see other people that think the same way, then you share that experience. It's great. If you don't want to do like that, that could be a drag, because you say, oh, you know, I'm going to say that, you know, only Dixieland music is the only real jazz, and the next thing I know, I'm only surrounded by Dixieland people, and I might be going, that's great, or I might be going, wow, that's pretty square, you know? So you never know. So the whole idea with life in general, I think, is just to keep all the parameters open, you know, because things are going to shut down anyway. You even outside of your control. So you might as well keep all the fire. Yes?
How do you change your approach to the drum set based on our music style?
Excellent question. You want something? Can I give you a... Is it okay if I do this, Tom? Yes. Yeah, okay. How is this? Is that okay? Okay. How do I change? Okay. Well, for one thing, what does the music sound like? Sound. Okay. So, if I'm playing with a piano trio, and they have an acoustic bass, and so you know you're thinking it's not going to be really that loud. You want the bass drum, because you know it's funny. People call it the kick drum, right? Now it used to be called the bass drum because it's the bass end of the drum set, low notes. You know, then you've got the more time, which could be tenor or baritone. You know, then a lot of people call this like the tenor tom. So that could be bass, baritone, and tenor or alto. When people used to play heel down, and that was the bass. Because I mean, back in the old days, before the hi-hat was invented, you know, people played. So and this is time. So that's why people dance, because they can feel that bass. So, but people were playing heel down. Now with rock, you know, you kind of, so you start kicking it. So whenever I'm with a sound person and they say, give me the kick drum, it's like, oh, okay, this guy's probably coming from more like a rock background than give me the bass drum. Oh, okay, that's a different type of person. So then I try to match. I want the drums to be in tune with themselves, meaning that each drum by itself should sound good. I don't tune the specific intervals, fifths or fourths. I mean, usually I don't. And then, so if every drum is working together really well, I figure out in general there's two different types of music. So you have jazz, where you have ride cymbal is your time. That's why I call it ride cymbals. People are riding. And then the bass drum and snare are foundational, but they're also complement. Guess what comping means? Everyone know comping means accompaniment or complement. So if I'm playing, I'm not going to be. So I'm not going to be doing that. So I want the drums to be sort of open, higher pitched usually, because a lot of times with jazz, the drum set is like almost like one instrument. So you have darker cymbals and higher pitched drums, and the break between the drums and the cymbals is sort of invisible. So you can just go all over the place. With rock, on the other hand, you're going to use bigger sizes usually because of volume. They're going to be tuned probably lower because you want to have like some punch. And then a lot of times with the cymbals, a lot of times the drums are down here and the cymbals can be kind of higher pitched because the time, instead of coming from the hand up here, is coming from here. And then this stuff you just kind of fill it in the space like a hand radio player or something. So you start thinking about that. That's pretty much it. And then, depending on whoever's hired me. So in other words, like if I'm in a recording studio, there's usually a producer, so he might be looking for a certain sound, a tight snare drum or a low snare drum. But in general, after a while, now people just kind of hire me for me, which is nice. I just kind of do what I want to do. But in the old days, you try to again broaden your horizons. It's better saying no, I'm not going to do what you want. You say, okay, I'm going to make this guy happy, which makes me happy because I just broadened my horizons. I might have tuned in a way I never tuned before. Or I might have heard myself go, wow, I actually like that more inside music than I did if I just did my way. So again, it's just, it's a positive attitude. And, one thing was really cool. I was just out of college, so I must have been like, 21 or 22 or something. And I was doing this gig on the north side of Chicago. And there was a great bass player named Leddy, who was like a legendary bass player. I don't know if you know Errol Garner. Errol Garner was Misty. So I'm playing with this guy, Eddie Kelton, and on the first break, he goes, kid, you'll always work. But, yeah, you'll always work. And what do you mean? He goes, no, man, you play happy drums. You make people feel happy when you play drums. I was like, wow, that's cool, And so that's the other thing, too, is like, the drums they're such a vital part of of what's going on with the music. I mean, it's kind of the heartbeat of the band, but we're also the conductors. So, we're shaping the dynamics, we're shaping the tempo, we're shaping, how edgy it is. Because I mean, different conductors. I mean, somebody like, Leonard Bernstein, famous conductor from New York Philharmonic. I mean, he was really passionate, and like some of his early stuff, he was faster, more edgy. Some conductors are lazier. So for us, the way we play is really like, we kind of put our mark on the band. The other thing too, I kind of learned. I mean, I hope you guys find this interesting because I mean, a lot of these stories too are really kind of ways I grew up. I used to feel the time way in front. I've got a great time. I never get off with a clip. It's weird. But, I used to feel really in front, which means that when you're playing with a band, you're kind of leading the band in what they're going to do because you're milliseconds in front of them. So one time, I was really sick. I had the flu, and I could barely move. And I went to the gig, and I'm sitting there playing, and these are really great musicians that I played with over years. And I'm playing with them, and I can't even do it well. So I'm just kind of hanging out, listening to them while I'm playing. So on the first break, they go, "Man, you sound great." And I'm going, "What? I'm crazy, And ding, I was listening to them. So instead of, because the one thing in high school, there was only like maybe 2 or 3 really good players in our stage, in our jazz. There was a great alto player who, unfortunately, his dad didn't let him study music. And I'd seen him recently. He was always bitter about that. But the bass player and keyboard player, I mean, they weren't really musicians. And I mean, I've got a recording of this bass player. We did live recording in the auditorium in Gary Grove one year, and we were playing this tune by a guy named John Higgins. He'd write these ridiculously, it was 11/8 and everything. So we're playing, and it comes to an unaccompanied bass. This guy is not a bassist. So, the band goes, and the guy goes, he starts screaming. I've got this on recording. So henceforth, when I was in the band, I was responsible for keeping the time, keeping everybody in line, which makes it, it's like you become the time police, which is also a very lonely job because if people are rushing and dragging around, and even if your time is perfect, everything starts, it's always feels like this. So it wasn't until I met a bass player from Crystal Lake that became my friend that I started going, okay, now I'm playing with a good bass player. But even then, I wasn't listening. I was still the time police because I was programmed to be the time police. And so it took a long time until this moment finally happened where I went, wow, when you play with musicians, you don't have to sit there. This is what it is. The bass player's going and you just match the thing. It's like in conversations. If you don't listen to what they have to say and you're just going to say what you say no matter what the subject is or who you're talking with, it's very lonely and it gets very boring. But then if you listen to people and you go, oh, wow, yeah, okay, silence, okay, yeah, then all of a sudden you start growing. So that was a big epiphany for me about like all of a sudden realizing, the importance of playing with people. And henceforth, instead of playing in front of the beat, I might be playing in the middle of the beat, I might be playing it back in the beat. Because if someone's playing already and I'm laying on him, I'm just slightly behind. So to get back to the beatnik, which I was talking about, I'll mess around with that. I'll see if I can place my time either dead center accurately or in front accurately or behind it. And so those little things make a big difference. So, because like in the studio, for instance, if you're, it's great edgy when people are really in front of drummers pushing, it really gives a lot of energy. But for some music, it just sounds like it's nervous. And you're not allowing people to get out that last part of their phrase. Say the guitar player's playing 16th note 1, and you're chopping off that last 32nd of his last 16th, that's a drag, So if you can just lay it and keep it in time and everybody can just kind of flow on it, then it becomes really, really, really nice, And the other thing about comping is to think about the language is that, you have in English, you have, commas, periods, exclamation marks, question marks, right? So like when you play, you can think about that too. So if I'm playing behind somebody and, if I go an exclamation mark, like that. But if I go like question mark, know, it's like, what? You know, or just little constant periods. I hear you. You know, and you're just kind of like letting them phrase, and you're putting in your little dits and dats where they're not talking about it. It's great. So that's a big part of it too. How are we doing time-wise? Excellent, excellent. Okay. Here's a shirt. Thanks. More questions, please. Yes. Great. I didn't really have one. You know, I had many. I mean, really, everybody I heard was an influence. I mean, so, you know, at the particular time, you know, rock-wise, I mean, there was the great John Bonham, who wasn't my favorite band. Keith Moon, I love Keith Moon. I love Ginger Baker. I love Mitch Mitchell from Jimi Hendrix, because he was like a jazz drummer, very musical. But there was like millions of other like drummers in smaller bands that were big influences. Guys, Robert Wyatt from the Soft Machine, probably never heard of him, or Michael Giles from King Crimson. So, and then the jazz drummers, I went all the way back to Baby Dots. I mean, I would, you know, order records from like France and stuff. I had Joe Jones talking, there's a double record called The Drums, where he's explaining all these other drummers and explaining his tap dance routines behind the floor, different tap dancers. So, you know, I love the old school. So I went all the way from, you know, Baby Dots, and you know, when I was like your guys' age, you know, I'd be seeing like Roy Haynes was like one of my favorites. You know, I saw like Elvin Jones, Tony Williams, Blakey, and so you know, I had all those kind of influences. And the one thing I liked about all of them is that one thing, they sounded totally unique. Two, it wasn't that they were busy, you know, but they were intense. I mean, when they played music, I mean, they were a big part of the musical picture, you know. And I also loved Ringo and loved Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones, because those parts, I mean, these guys aren't technically the greatest drummers, but when they played, they made the music sound better. And that's sort of our job, you know, unless we're the leader and you know, it's our music. But all those guys, and then listening to, you know, Ala Tunji, he was a great African musician, so you know, pick up on stuff like that. I listened to, you know, Ala Raka, great Indian tabla player. So you know, you start putting all that stuff together. And I'm not really one of those guys that you know, wants to know, you know, exactly the names of every beat of those guys are playing. I mean, when I need to know, I do. But in general, I kind of like to steal, you know, take little things and kind of put them together, you know. So that was it. Yeah. You know, I don't know. I guess I always loved beating on pots and pans. You know, it was just one of those things where when I was in 6th grade, or even before that, you know, I do my homework to the radio. And, you know, so I love music. So, you know, so whatever was on the radio would be kind of, you know, I'd be playing along, doing that with pencils or whatever, like everybody does. And then one time my mom and I were, we were in just like, it was in Fox River Grove, Illinois, just having lunch, and they had a jukebox. They put on this guy named Sandy Nelson. Sandy Nelson was this drummer from the 60s that sold millions of records. And they were like, he had like all these really like drum records. And he sold, and the music was like surf music. I remember hearing that, I really liked that. And then another time, my mom and I were driving along this lake. See, I mean, these are vivid memories. Driving along this lake, all of a sudden, a Buddy Rich big band, it's called Uptight, it was a Stevie Wonder tune. And that's pretty much it for me. Obviously, sights and loves. And I always loved sports, so I love the physicality of playing the instrument too. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Go ahead. I do a little bit. I mean, it was one of those things where, you know, like in school I played marimba and everything. I was in Tipnis and the symphonic wind ensemble and all that. But for some reason, the drum set was enough for me. I mean, again, you know, talking about expression, I think of volume as pitch. So when I get louder, I don't think necessarily it gets louder. You hear the pitch going? So like when I'm playing, I'm basically playing a keyboard for myself. Except, you know, the pitches aren't necessarily like pitched like a piano, but that's the way I think. So that was it. Yeah.
You said you play like very freely and you don't like to do things exactly by the book. But does that mean that you don't use any rudiments or?
No, I used to. Oh yeah. Well, okay, great question. I used to hate the rudiments because I didn't know what you could do with them. Now, when I teach the rudiments, I mean the rudiments are the greatest because you start realizing, like a four-stroke rough, right? How many times have you heard Ginger Baker or Max Roach do that? Or, like a paradiddle diddle, just to do that stuff, I didn't even know what a paradiddle diddle was until I realized that I was doing it for years. I went, oh, that's what that was. So then I started getting way into the rudiments. Because the rudiments, they give you smarter hands. They allow you to get around the kit in a lot of different ways. And then when you start getting creative, I mean, it's like, yeah, just to go, that's okay. But I mean, when you start breaking it up, then you start realizing not only other drummers, oh, I love that, I always love that lick, now I know what it was, but it also gives you the ability to start mixing around and make your own kind of special licks with it too. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely into the rudiments now, but back then I wasn't. Yes?
Match grip versus traditional ball.
I grew up totally equal.
Well, I mean, do you prefer one for
No,
style music?
no.
Or just
I really find that the
style
traditional
music?
allows me to do like a lot of little kind of weird things, especially with brushes. A lot because I can use these fingers in a different way than this. But I mean, if you watch even like Tony Williams, I mean, there's a video of him playing with his quintet in New York. He's literally changing like about every 20 seconds. He's kind of going back and forth. I mean, it's just they sound
if you want right then.
Pardon? Yeah, it's just what you want right then. Yeah, and I find I don't know. I feel like I can be more expressive this way. I don't know why, because I did grow up. This is the way I learned it at first. But then when this first came out, again, I remember being in school and kids were laughing at Ringo because Ringo was playing like-handed match grip. Oh, that's wrong. Now look at it. And now I mean, you can do that. You can start playing left-handed. I mean, this would be not as comfortable. So now why do this? Why put yourself in this position? You move around that too. So all that stuff.